Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chief Marketing Officer Peter Finter.
Good morning. Good morning, New York, and good morning, a special good morning to everyone who's joining us today on live stream. It really is fantastic to be with you, to be here in New York, and to talk about the thing that is driving our present age more than anything else, digital innovation. Is there any innovation represented in the room today or online that is not disrupting or being disrupted or needing to become a self-disruptor? Digital innovation really is at the center of what we all need to be achieving for our own organizations today. And the single biggest impact that we can have as we think about the ways that we need to transform is when we think about the ways we need to transform customer experience. And as a chief marketing officer, it's increasingly the responsibility of people in my function to lead the charge on behalf of their organizations. It's creating bridges between the technology and the marketing functions that have never existed in quite the same way before. And the purpose of the session today is to give you an introduction as to how these bridges can be built and how that is manifesting in customers we're already engaged with and those that we will be engaged with moving forwards. So the reality is, exactly as Matt said, it's not just about having the shiny device and the fancy app. It's actually about the way in which we deliver a consistent set of experiences. A single moment in time is simply not enough. It's about the way that we link those moments together to create an ongoing relationship, an ongoing engagement that makes the difference. And it's the key to retaining our existing customers who are vulnerable to being wooed by our competitors and your competitors. It's key to being able to attract new customers, and it's key to being able to grow your customers. And I don't know of a single business where that's not at the very heart of what their organization is about. Now, this whole thing is not new to us. We've been engaged in customer engagement driven by data since 2011. And 2011 is the same year that Geoffrey Moore coined his expression, systems of engagement. You'll probably know Geoffrey Moore as the author of Crossing the Chasm, a book that was entirely centered around digital innovation. And he coined the phrase systems of engagement because he recognized that the traditional systems of record, the databases that were designed for a prior era, were simply not keeping up with the needs to be able to innovate in the space around customer experience. And this is affecting companies that we classify in two different ways. Those that are born digital, like Couchbase, born in the digital era, and those that were born pre-digital, more established enterprises, household names. What brings them together is that both need a new database designed for a new era. To help us understand more about what that means, I'd like to bring to the stage our Senior Vice President of Products and Engineering, Ravi Mayuram. Please give him a big welcome.
Good morning, Peter.
Ravi, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Good to be here to do a little give and take with you, to put us both in the New York state of mind. Good morning, everybody.
A New York state of mind, I like that already. So I'd like us to start, if we may, Ravi, by talking about some of the customers that we've been working with over the last little while. And let's start with a name that will be familiar to everyone, one of the most extraordinary phenomena of the present age, a company that created a game, the most downloaded game ever, the most downloaded app ever, a game that exploded beyond expectations.
Correct.
How did we help them deliver a consistently awesome experience?
If one word comes to mind, it is scale. Unprecedented, unplanned scale. That was their problem. They didn't expect this to be such a social phenomenon. How do you cater to a social phenomenon? Because that has never happened before. So their challenge was in terms of how to scale their application when hundreds of thousands, 700,000 users were getting to play this game on a daily basis. 700,000 people were registering. Millions were playing concurrently. So at that scale, how do you plan for it? You cannot. That's going to be the next reality of this digital economy. You should be walking in saying that I don't know how big this is going to be. That's what you got to plan for. and the databases of the future have to enable you to scale to that. What we did in this case was to help them achieve this scale seamlessly without disruption to their customers' experience. This was their platform for user registration. The trainer, Pokemon trainer accounts were created using this one. This was originally written in a relational system, and they quickly came to the realization that this is not going to scale. So eventually they came to Couchbase, and the beauty of this was that they never had to move the data. They never had to reshard or move the data around. All they did was add capacity for query and indexing, and that just scaled. So they started with like a 8-node cluster, eventually ended with about close to 80-node cluster. The 8 node still serves the data. The rest of them are about query and indexing. So this is what we call multidimensional scaling. That helped us solve their problem so that they could retain their customers, and the customer experience was so paramount to their initial days of success.
So gaming obviously is a very specialized area and companies that are focused on that. But I think the theme that you're bringing out here is that for many of us, the applications that we're building, we just don't know when we're building them exactly how well they're going to take off and how much that challenge will create for us. Being able to be prepared for that's crucial. Well, let's look at another example of a customer that we've been working with in a very different environment. This one, Marriott. Here we are in a major hotel here in New York. The Marriott experience was something that they were very concerned to transform. Hospitality is a very well-established business, but being significantly disrupted by companies like Airbnb and others. What kind of help were we able to give Marriott as they thought about how they would be winning customers and keeping customers in the future?
If you think about it, Peter, perhaps all this setup that we did here, maybe it did go through Couchbase, because SPG and Marriott, one system and everything. So the hoteling industry is definitely going through a transformation. That's because earlier when you were looking at booking hotels or airline, those are all going through travel agents who would basically be taking care of reserving those availability. They'll be the ones who will be checking. But that has changed. All of us are sort of becoming travel agents in our own way, and we are the ones looking. And when we look, there are millions of us looking as opposed to maybe the tens or hundreds of thousands of travel agents. So that scale has completely changed. The original systems of reservations, the systems of record here, were built on mainframe systems. A single mainframe sitting somewhere in the US serving all the customers across the globe. That doesn't scale, because the data, if you're sitting somewhere in China, if you have to fetch this information, it has to traverse all the way, and there is a latency in that thing. That you lose customer experience if people are going to be waiting for the page to load. So that was the problem they had to solve in terms of both the volume of data that they had to serve as well as the proximity of the data. It cannot all come to one single location. So they had to geo-distribute the data and then achieve that scale, because there are millions of users now looking for it. So they put Couchbase as the system of engagement in front of the system of record, which is their mainframe. And now every reservation that is going through Marriott goes through Couchbase. If Couchbase is down, you cannot make reservations over there. It's as critical as the mainframe.
So for Marriott's case, it was about this issue of scaling and distribution of information and making it available to the user on demand at scale.
Correct.
A similar kind of issue, interestingly, in the healthcare industry today, where historically that data has been heavily centralized, but increasingly there's a desire to bring that data to the edge, and specifically to be able to collect it from the patient directly or through devices connected to the patient directly and bring it back in. BD, a Fortune 500 company, a well-established business in this space, is all about that patient interaction, sharing patient data and using it. Tell us a little bit about the application here and how we were able to support them in that.
True. I think Matt was referring to this earlier. The digital healthcare is going through a different transformation. It's no longer patient care. You want to actually be more preventative. So it's prevention is better than cure is the general philosophy over there. So before someone is a patient, you want to make sure that you track their health and well-being and figure out patterns that you can actually help diagnose their any impending issues that's coming. So in that regard, the BD application was basically about insulin tracking levels. As you can imagine, we are not always going to be in places where there is Wi-Fi or connectivity. So this was a case for a totally occasionally connected system, as we call it. So they were gathering all the insulin levels of their customers and tracking that in an offline device, and whenever the online connectivity was available, this information was uploaded. Now the doctors could see the patterns, prescribe the right sort of preventative medication before it became some sort of an issue. So this is how life is going to change. Currently, we are sort of tracking a specific physical device. One day this will also change where nanotechnology, biotechnology, information technology will come together. There's a prediction which says that maybe in the 2 generations we will no longer be just totally organic, we'll be bionic. So this is the initial stages
Some
of
of
that.
us are already halfway there, Ravi. So healthcare is obviously an area which is undergoing tremendous transformation. For our last example this morning, let's talk a little bit about a company that will be very familiar to people in the room here, namely Comcast, a company that is competing for business now with a whole new wave of entrance into the digital streaming arena. This is a very challenging environment. We know it's putting huge pressure on organizations like that, and presumably the quality of the customer experience is becoming the key factor that's driving their ability to retain and grow those customers. What was happening in the case of Comcast? How did we help them with that issue?
So Comcast is what you typically, it's been the dream of many of the telecom companies to be a triple play, which is basically voice, internet, and TV. So as you can imagine, each one is its own industry, and they are sort of pulling them all together. So there were multiple systems behind the scene. If you're a voice customer, different sets of applications. If you're an internet customer, different, and finally, if you're a TV, it's separate. So now, as a customer, I could have all 3, and if I were to call Comcast about a certain issue, now you have no correlation of whatever else has been happening, because these are disparate systems sitting all over the place. And if you had a voice issue and tomorrow you have a TV issue, they could be interconnected. Or you're getting frustrated because you're explaining the same symptom again and again to their reps. This is precisely the problem they wanted to solve. In the industry parlance, it is the 360 view of the customer. So this gives you a sense of your customer's experience from no matter where they come from or which part of the organization they're touching. It should have one consistent experience. And that's what they were able to power using Couchbase, where they brought in all the nodes from all these systems together. You will hear more about this from Comcast themselves later in the day, so let me not give you all the details. But this is very exciting for us to see. This is the sort of engagement that we really wanted to create this platform for. So it's the fluidity of being able to bring in data from multiple systems into one and make it available to the customers in microseconds. Only then the experience and engagement actually becomes translated to a customer success and eventually revenues.
You used the term customer 360, and as we look across all these different types of customers, what kind of patterns are you seeing, Ravi? What's connecting all of these things together? They seem initially to be very different, yet there seems to be some commonality as well.
It's a very good question, Peter, because last year we have had a tremendous success in the company, and what we saw was the proliferation of use cases that people were putting Couchbase to use. And we analyzed this in terms of looking at more than 100-odd customers. What are they building? And if you ask each one of them, they would give you a different answer in terms of what they're actually doing, and we categorize them, and you could see that generally the areas would be like user profile management, or a metadata management, or a catalog management, or a field service enablement. If you really look at all of them, the meta pattern that emerges out of this is one of customer experience. It's one of interaction than a transaction. This is where you basically are looking for ways to engage with the customer. So we saw this as a sort of everybody's building, they're all giving different names. It's the system of engagement that they're actually building, leaving the systems of record either in place or moving certain elements of the systems of record into the systems of engagement. So that's what we actually saw as a meta pattern. And when we observed this, this is not just a case of a digital native doing this. It's the transformation of the types of business that are doing this. That's basically, if you will, people are taking the modular stuff that is sitting in monolithic applications and microservicifying them. When you do the microservicification, underneath it, you need a newer data infrastructure which can scale and perform to the need of that microservice and not be bottlenecked by the monolithic application. So that's the pattern.
I think you're making up a word. Is microservicification a real word? I'm not sure, but I like where you're going with this, which is this idea of a portfolio of solutions that build out to create the complete customer engagement journey. And it's fascinating when we look at the customers who have been implementing these solutions, just to realize what a wide range of customers that we really have across different industries, different types of applications, different types of customers. This idea of a customer being a patient, or a customer being an employee, or a customer being a partner, all encompassed within this overall definition of a customer engagement environment. And I think the other thing that really stands out is this contrast between the digital natives and the pre-digital companies, and the fact that they're facing the same challenge in terms of innovation. So let's move on and talk a little bit about something you mentioned a moment ago, which is this difference between interactions and transactions.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit more about that. There's a very interesting image playing behind us right here. Can you help explain that for us?
So if you look at sort of a human behavior, what we normally do, I think this is actually best described in the parlance of what jet fighters talk about. It's called the OODA loop, which is observe, orient, decide, and act. So if you look at it, most of the time what we're doing is observing, orienting, and making decisions before we actually pull the trigger to act, which is actually the transaction. A lot of the stuff that you're actually doing when you're interfacing with anything is the observe, orient, and interact. So there are interactions, a lot more interactions than transaction. So far, in various industries, this has got various parlance. Like, I mean, in the travel industry, I think it's called
look to book?
Look to book ratio, thank you. So it's called the look to book ratio. So that's what you saw in the case of Marriott. The look to book ratio completely went off their script, if you will, because earlier they had planned for 100 to 1 look to book ratio, which is what travel agents were doing. Now all of us are doing it. So it became a 10,000 to 1.
10,000 to 1. So there's 10,000 interactions
to one transaction.
Each individual transaction.
Correct.
That's a massive explosion of data to be managed in this customer engagement end of the process before it becomes something that needs to be locked away into the transaction database, correct?
Precisely. And in the retail also we have a similar thing. I think it's either called browse to buy or browse to...
all these fancy terms. I feel like there's marketers in there somewhere making this stuff up.
Browse to binge and browse to buy.
Browse to binge, that's right. Something I've heard about for digital media.
That's the Netflix coin term,
okay, yes. Yep. So there's probably no limit to this, is there? But the concept is across all these different environments.
Correct. And in the case of, this is actually what we're doing here is digitally recreate what has happened in real life. If you look at departmental stores, they have 50 aisles where all the merchandise is actually displayed, but they have 4 cash registers. That's because you want to give the customer that experience of engaging, of looking, touching, feeling the product that they are actually before and comparing before they can make the decision of what to buy. And when they're ready to buy, it should be a seamless process. Actually, you shouldn't be spending too much time on that. That's generally how departmental stores and others are set up. So we are trying to recreate this in the digital world by creating those digital aisles, if you will. And in the digital world, it can become more compelling because you can now slice and dice the aisles to your need, customized need, as opposed to how it is physically laid out. So that's the beauty of what we're trying to do here.
So I like that analogy, this idea that all of us are getting used to being presented with more choice and more options than ever before, and frankly, taking probably more time to decide what we actually want at the end of the day, but certainly spending more time worrying about what the alternatives are than probably what we actually end up purchasing. But as we think about how that applies to the world that we're living in, the database environment that we're living in, it seems to me that that means we have to think about a bunch of different dimensions. The scale, that's one you've touched on already. This thing is obviously huge.
Yes.
But it's also about agility, isn't it? It's about the ability to respond and reflect these changing environments.
Yes.
There are other things, flexibility, manageability. Maybe we need to talk a little bit about how people are trying to solve this problem today, right?
Yes.
This is not a completely new problem. What have
Yes.
people been doing, and why is that not really working for them?
Yes, people are sort of cobbling together this sort of solution using what I would call like chewing gum and baling wire equivalent of
Chewing gum
here.
and baling wire, technical terms, right?
By using a caching solution here, a search solution there, a relational system here, a NoSQL system there, a Hadoop system here, putting them all together, trying to solve this problem, because there has been no single tool that could actually help them solve this problem so far. So it's been one of those, I use the word specifically baling wire because it's all about connectors. all over the place you're connecting and moving data and replicating data and creating inconsistencies and data bloats and all that stuff is because there has never been a truly thought out solution which solves all these issues that you described: manageability, scalability, performance, agility and flexibility. These are the core principles that need to be solved. And no one single system solves it so far. And that is the problem we are basically trying to solve.
We need a name for that new system, don't we? What are we going to call it? How about we call it an engagement database?
That's the right word for it.
Does that sound like a good name for it?
Absolutely.
None of this caching and key value stores and all these bits and pieces. Why don't we put it together into something that can actually be a solution that delivers across these different environments? So what specifically does this database need to be able to do for us?
The engagement database basically has to solve, like I was mentioning, three main things. The volume of data that it has basically got to address has got to be something that is built for the web scale, as we call it. It's got to give a very personalized experience for people, so when they sort of come to any of the customer engagement scenarios, that it is actually available. And all this information has to be available real time. It's about the data actually being available to the end user wherever they are, at whatever time they are. This is where the 5 nines availability, mobile availability of devices, whether the network is available or not, all this comes into play. So this is that engagement data platform that basically has to solve these set of problems, whether it be it on the edge or on the cloud, the performance, geo-distribution of data. These are the main characteristics.
So massive volumes of data, customized and personalized experiences, and real-time information. There just cannot be a delay between the customer and the data that's going to support their application, their experience. So let's talk a little bit about what the key attributes of a database like this needs to be. How would we know one if we saw one? Well, before we get into that, let's talk perhaps about how this fits with some of the other things that people have in their environment. You've already mentioned the Hadoops. You've mentioned the transactional relational databases. Do they go away with the advent of the engagement database?
No, absolutely not. They will not go away. I mean, this is like saying that relational systems are here, so mainframes are going to go away. That's not how this scenario works. This is actually a complementary. There are pieces that we need to carve out of both of these, and that's what is required, because otherwise if you go to multiple systems, you cause delays. So you need to have a system which is complementary, which almost sits before a transactional system, because like I said, it's the observe, orient, and the decision making that we need to enable here before the actual act on it happens. So certain elements of the analytics piece to provide the intelligence and the insight to it, and certain elements of the transactional, but now at a much different scale. If you take those out, that creates the engagement database, which actually sits in front, so that you engage with that first before you transact.
So it's probably fair to say that in the world without engagement databases, people were trying to take their existing database environments and stretch them into this new world. But I think what you're highlighting is they were designed for a different era. They were designed for a different purpose, and that purpose continues. Much as mainframes were once the only solution, today they're a part of a complete portfolio of solutions. The engagement database is designed for this purpose.
Absolutely.
It's designed to be leveraging the power of the analytics that's coming from the dedicated platforms, which are typically backward looking, right? I mean, one of the issues with analytics is it's typically historical data.
Correct.
And it takes time to process that data, which means in the real-time world of customer engagement, it's not always able to serve it up at the right rate and pace, and therefore the engagement database fits in that spot. So that's kind of exciting, I think, for those of us in the room who've been used to working in this familiar environment, because being able to provide a path forwards without a rip and replace is important.
Yes.
But recognize that over time workloads may well transition into this new space and this new environment, and of course some
That
of our
will leave to the
customers are doing it
customers to
already.
decide.
Up to the customer to decide. So let's talk a bit about these attributes.
Sure.
What is it that makes up an engagement database to help all of our audience think about the choices that they might need to be making moving forwards?
Right. First and foremost, this has to be in this world of cloud. When you have cloud computing winning the Preakness, you know it has arrived, right? So it's cloud, and it has got to be global because it's 5 nines availability. So you cannot give that excuse that my data center is down kind of stuff. It's got to be available no matter what. And it's got to be seamlessly mobile because the data has to be available at the point of interaction, and every year the kinds of types of commerce and interaction we do with our mobile device is sort of exploding. So it's got to be available. It's not about network connectivity, the mobile thing. It's about data availability where you are, when you want to interact. Then it's got to be intelligent. The built-in smarts has to come into play here because, like I was describing that loop, every act of yours should inform the next loop that you'll be engaging in. So it's got to take that insight and provide you with better experience the next time. It's got to be built for scale. That's a given in this web scale because it's about direct to consumer is the movement. And so the intermediaries are getting disintermediated. So all the agents are gone. It's directly to you. So it's got to be at that scale. Always on, I said the 5 nines, and always fast. This is the performance aspect of it because we don't have the time. Matt mentioned less than a goldfish attention span. So every microsecond counts here. And finally, it's got to be secure because a lot of customer data is sitting in these databases. So privacy, compliance to standards, everything comes into play. So these are the sort of the pillars around which the engagement database has to generally be built and cater to the needs.
Makes sense, and I think you said earlier on the importance of being able to deliver this in a single platform. But when we talk about Couchbase, specifically in this context, and I said earlier on that we've been engaged in helping our customers with this problem over the last several years, what is it that makes Couchbase stand out? Why can we claim to be the best solution to deliver this engagement database?
Let me start from the developers and take it all the way. So one of the first things you have to do here is enable agility because this is engaging directly with the customer. So there's a lot that's happening, the customer feedback, a market dynamic, a lot of stuff can change. And this platform has to enable you to adapt to that change very quickly. Gone are the days when you'll basically be able to say, yeah, that requires me to make a schema change. Okay, take a number, come back to me in 3 months, that application will be online. Gone. It should be done near real time, as in within days. Your drop to the ops should be happening in a couple of days. You take a half a day to develop this thing, couple of days to test it out, and then now your continuous integration is how the whole world operates now. So in that world, how do you do this thing? So the flexibility of the schema and the power of SQL that we married, that gives us businesses the agility to make a change to their application near real time. Then it's about performance. Once this is developed, now you have to deploy it. So you have to make the whole process of deployment easy. We'll come to that later. But it has got to scream at speeds of nanoseconds and microseconds and sub-hundreds of milliseconds. That's where the game is at. Because there is a survey that was done which said that for every 100 millisecond improvement in performance of a page, it's actually 1% increase in retail e-commerce revenue. Last year, the retail e-commerce was $462 billion. So 1% of that is significant, I'm assuming. So that's how it is basically, that's the economy. That's where it's at, and you have to cater to that. If businesses don't understand or take this thing seriously, like you said, they will not survive. And last but not the least, when you put these kind of systems up there, you have a cluster that you have to manage. It's got to be easy. It's got to be easy to secure. It's easy to deploy, easy to upgrade, and never have any downtime when you're going from one version to the next and stuff like that, and available across the globe, so across data center replication. All these capabilities have to be built in natively, cannot be sort of glued on top of each other. So those are the characteristics that make Couchbase that unique platform. And we are informed that we are unique by our customer experiences. And that's what has been the biggest benefit for us. When we looked at the use cases, the breadth of use cases where customers are using us, that's what it tells us. And that's what has empowered us in one sense to codify this to be the engagement database, because that's exactly how customers are using us.
Now those are great claims, and I'm a marketing guy. It sounds like you're becoming the CMO here, Ravi, so I'm getting a little threatened by that. But you know what? I've heard other people make these kinds of claims for their platforms. Agility and flexibility and manageability and performance and scale. I mean, who isn't using that language? Can you help us understand what it is that we've done in our platform that allows us to make this claim? And I think it's a claim I've heard you say, that this is the single most powerful NoSQL-based platform, data platform in the world. That's a pretty big claim to be making.
Yes.
What sits underneath? Pull back the covers for us a little bit, Ravi, and take us into the product and into the platform itself. And I think it's going to take you more than a minute to do that. So I'm going to step off the stage, leave it to you, and I'll be back when you take us through it. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Peter left me with a tough question since he's off the stage. It's nothing against him. But the answer is, it's the architecture, stupid. Well, he got me by saying, you're being a CMO, so it's my time to put on my engineering side of the equation and explain to you why it is all in the architecture of it. This has to be built ground up. Like I said, you cannot cobble these things together and make it work, because every time you cobble something together, it's delays. Anything that can fail is what happens, and when you put so many of these moving parts together, that's the risk you run. And the architecture we have put together is ground up, different for this one, which is memory first and network-centric architecture. The traditional systems were all disk-oriented. Now memory is way cheaper than the disk. So how would you start a new database if you have to redesign it in this current world? That's where we start. Elastic scaling. We have this capability of multidimensional scaling. We have this shared nothing distributed architecture. That's what gives us both this ability to scale infinitely as well as perform at this speed of memory. On this, we have multiple capabilities on top of this core database engine. We have the ability to do a key value, which we call a primary key lookup. To this, we added the query capability, which is the SQL style syntax, along with a secondary indexing infrastructure behind it, and then we'll be improving on that. Besides that, we also have the mobile solution, which is about data synchronization and conflict resolution, so that on the edge, you have the same set of data as near real time as possible based on your connectivity. All this programmable in the similar fashion, the unified programming interface and manageability interface, which is for uniform management of this, with all the connectors for both the SQL ecosystem, big data ecosystem. You need this because only then the data is dynamic. That has to move between the various systems and serve it to the customers fast. What I'm about to talk to you today is about the great innovations we have made in this platform going into the future. I am going to talk to you about our latest release, which is Couchbase Server 5.0, which is in beta right now, as of now, along with the Couchbase mobile platform, which is 2.0. Please join me in giving a round of applause to the great engineering team, which has done a phenomenal job putting this out. Two years ago, I was here in New York announcing our 4.0. Many of you are perhaps here then. We did that at the Cipriani's at the Wall Street. I was so happy to see the Couchbase flag flying up on Wall Street. So today, I'm back here again announcing to you the availability of our next great leap in moving the platform forward. So now if you look, what are the main characteristics inside this? What have we really built here? What is the game-changing innovations here? That's what I want to talk to you about. It will be in these three categories of agility, performance, and manageability. Now, if you start looking into each one of these, we can go into detail. The biggest thing that I want to talk to you about here is the ability to search. There's one major, I wouldn't want to call it a feature, it's a whole industry in its own way. We are bringing that together with the database. So what does this do? This is very powerful, because what we are doing is that in one instance, when you look at your data, you're able to look at it in a structured form, do a structured query, as well as do a tokenized search. What is search? You type in a word and it gets you information based on that. That's what we are used to in the Googles and the Yahoos of the world. Now we bring that power to JSON. So we are a JSON database, as you know, and JSON is a human-readable document format. That's what it is. You can read through the whole thing. Now you can treat this as a Word document and find stuff in it, which is what search allows you to do. At the same time, it's also a schema and data together in one form. That's the power of it, for which we built the Nickel interface earlier. So in the same document, which is the data model describing the data that is sitting inside there, you can do a structured query. Give me all the orders more than $1,000 placed by someone from this zip code. Or you can say, show me all the orders of iPhone, because there you don't know what it is going to be. It could be sitting in, show me all iPhone words in this collection, which could basically come from anywhere. It could be sitting in a description, it could be sitting in a summary, wherever it is. that gives you a certain different way of looking at the same data. This power of combining the structured query and a tokenized search will liberate you in terms of what kind of applications you can imagine and build on top of this. So that's basically the search capability, in which we have the standard TF, IDF based ranking, highlighting, lexical analysis, parsing, term vectoring. All those capabilities are sitting there. We can do facets. Now, the way we have built it on our platform gives you the ability to sort of manage this index. We call this the reverse index. So that's what search is. So we had the primary index, then we added the secondary index, now we have the inverted index. All these are managed in the standard way of Couchbase, all the way to scale out the indexes, how you sort of place them, how you manage them, everything is taken care of. You don't have to have another system do this. So at the end of the day, what is the advantage here? It's about you not having to move the data. That's what it comes down to. What does it buy you? Speed and consistency. Because otherwise what you do these days is basically create a connector, move this data from the database to a search system, create its own index out there, crawl the data there, and then query in that system. But by the time you do that, the data here has changed, so it's stale. Anytime you do a search in a different system from where the database is actually interacting on, it changes the game. And so by doing this, you are not duplicating data, less inconsistencies, and faster performance. That's the benefit of this one. Now, looking at other feature functionality that we have here, one thing I want to talk about is adaptive indexing. This is the magic behind the capabilities here. So in relational systems, if you had, let's say, a document which has got 50 elements, and you want to query on only 10 of those, you will have to go create the indexes on those, let's say, 10 columns. And you have to create a 10 factorial set of indexes based on the performance benefits you want, because the order of indexes, weightage of indexes, everything matters. We want to take that out of it. So there's no more query planning that you have to do. That's where we want to reach. With adaptive indexes, you create one index on those 10 columns, or in this case, 10 fields that is sitting in a JSON document. The rest of the magic happens inside. And this is where the search system and our secondary index system all can help with this way of managing your indexes by just creating one and let the system take care of the rest, because it will do stuff like parallel scanning, bitmap, ORing, all that kind of stuff, and finally give you the result. So the machine will take care of stuff, otherwise you had to sit and manage and plan. So that's a great capability in terms of you having to do less with the system, and the system will take care of more for you. The next major thing out there is the extensions we have done to Nickel. So if you really look at when I talked about microservicification, what really happens is, at the end of the day, it's a stateless endpoint. What does it spew out? JSON. Now, you can take that JSON from multiple microservices and the data that is sitting in Couchbase, and you can join them. You can actually do predicate logic on it, push that thing down to the database, and you can compose now microservices together in one place. This is very powerful. It'll give you the ability to speed up stuff. Otherwise, you are composing this thing on the client side, and things will be slower. So this is a great advantage in terms of using this Nickel extensions to bring your microservices together. And we have a lot of other major innovations in other areas, but on the server. We'll come to that as part of the other categories. But I want to highlight a couple of things on the mobile side first. Just like we have introduced search on the server side, the similar capability will be available on the edge as well. This, along with the Nickel query semantics, which you'll also have on the edge, gives you one unified platform. If you learn to program to Couchbase one way, it's consistent, whether you're doing it on the mobile front, because I understand a mobile developer is very different from a server developer. All that is good. But in terms of understanding how a platform works, we want to maintain the same semantics on both sides. So those are sort of a couple of features there, but the mobile platform itself is going through a lot of great innovation over there. We are actually trying to reduce the code base so that it can speed up as well as have a lot less memory footprint on the device. And we are doing stuff like automated conflict resolution, so you don't have to worry about revision histories, whole bunch of other stuff over there. Now, in terms of performance, many of you here may know of this. Some of you have even asked for this. This is our in-memory buckets. So far, as you know, for our distributed share nothing architecture, we have sort of, in terms of moving the data, we have used disk as an interface to do some of that stuff. That is now removed. So you can just rebalance or move the data between hundreds of nodes just from memory to memory. There are scenarios where people are basically looking for just in-memory performance characteristics. You will hear from some of our customers who need that level of sort of performance. Why sometimes, even if you're using this for synchronization, disk does become a bottleneck at very high throughputs when people are doing tens of millions of ops per second. You heard me right. It's 10 million operations per second people are doing in our systems to serve their customers, and it's about a 80-20 rule. So imagine like 8 million of those are reads and 2 million of them are writes per second. It is happening at that scale, at that level of performance that you want. Disk sometimes, even if you're using to synchronize movement of data, becomes very slow. So we want to remove that limitation. Second is, in some cases, cost, where you don't need to have attached storage, and all you want to do is memory-oriented stuff. We have extended our memory-optimized indexes. Next thing, this is a great innovation which we had done earlier, which is based on this lockless, skipless infrastructure to actually work at scale beyond what your memory allows you to. So now you can persist that indexes that are bigger than what your memory can hold for that index on disk as well. And we are doing many other innovations on this front. I just wanted to highlight these couple of innovations that we have done on the performance side. Now, in terms of managing this, there are a few other things that are very critical. Fast failover is one thing where some of you know we are called a CP system in the CAP theorem of things. So we picked consistency over availability, which means that when a certain node is not available, we used to wait. In our case, the agreed upon wait time was of 120 seconds. So for about 2 minutes, you will have that node is not available because you don't want to take those writes and then cause you consistency problems. So we would have that delay. We have completely redesigned this area to allow you to have a failover time of only 5 seconds. The application might take a little bit longer than that, but within 5 seconds, that cluster will be failed over and you will have this data available from its next replica. So this is a phenomenal innovation that allows you to maintain consistency while availability is not that impacted. And we mentioned secure, secure, secure. Every release, we make a lot of innovation for security. In this one, we added role-based access control for both applications and users. We have also added the index replica capability, so you have less to do with index. And we have done a phenomenal job of visualizing a lot of stuff in our query interface for query planning and looking at the bottlenecks. So those are some of the major innovations that we have added here. Now, if you look, what is it that we'll be doing in the future? I want to give you a sense of that. We are working on analytics, which is also available as a preview. This is to find the insight from the data that is sitting in Couchbase. We are not trying to compete with the data lake guys on the other side, the Hadoops or that side of the world. This is about finding insights in the data that you're actually putting in Couchbase. With this, you're going to have one platform where you can manage your data, find information, which is search, and then find the insights, which is from analytics. So that's our vision of building one platform where you can find data, information, and insight. The advantage is that the shorter OODA loop that I was talking about, which is what gives you the competitive advantage when you want to have that customer engaged with you as opposed to someone else. It is that critical. We have had great fun. We have enjoyed building this platform. Our customers and partners are enjoying building those applications. The last year has been a revelation to us in terms of the kinds of applications people are building on us. Some of it has surprised us. They are enjoying building this. I would request you all to come, join us, and have fun with this and build more applications which will blow our minds. Thank you so much. I'm going to have Peter come on back here and help me introduce the other speakers.
Thank you so much, Ravi. What a fantastic overview you just provided for us of a platform to revolutionize our customers' experiences. One question remains: When can our customers get a hold of this phenomenal technology? Ravi?
Thanks for reminding me, Peter. Yes, it's available. The Couchbase server is available as a beta as of now. Couchbase mobile is available as a preview. So is our analytics platform. We will be announcing a GA of Couchbase server sometime in fall, and beta at the same time of Couchbase mobile, followed by a GA of Couchbase mobile.
Fantastic. So they can get it basically today, before you leave today, you can download and start using this technology.